Good evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's webinar. Thanks very much for joining us. So I'm your host for this evening. My name is Mark Lee. I'm a coach developer working predominantly in the grassroots game with volunteer coaches and particularly focused on foundation phase and youth development phase. I'll introduce you to my colleagues. So I'm joined tonight by Debbie Barry from the PE team and Stu Delaney from the Pro Game team. So just to share with you the aims of this evening. So what we'll try and cover, we'll look at how to identify the game within the game, which sounds like a bit of a tongue twister and a little bit complex, but hopefully we can bring that to life for you and simplify it. The value of smaller game formats, so small number training sessions to help players understand their roles and understand individual strategies as part of the games program, and then to help them recognize individual strengths and weaknesses of themselves and their direct opponents and adapt their approach based on the opponent they have in front of them. First part that we're going to look at is how do you identify the game within the game? So that's a phrase that people on the call might not have heard of. So what does that mean and what kind of things do you think about when you're breaking it down and analysing game within a game? So tell us what it is first and tell us how you approach it.
Yeah, I think what game within a game means to me is making the game more manageable. So when you've got 22 players on a pitch, it can be quite chaotic to try and see, not only for us but also for the players. So maybe breaking it down to a manageable number, whether that's a 1v1, 5v5, whatever numbers it may be, but really honing in on them kind of individual players, whether that's an individual, a unit, either units horizontally or vertically. We're just breaking it down to smaller numbers. For one, it allows the coach to observe exactly what's going on, but also it allows them to think about what practice might look like. So that's what a game within a game means to me in terms of breaking the game down, makes it more manageable for the coach to observe what's going on, but then allows the coach to design practice to allow the players to practice what they might need to do before it goes back into the 11v11 or the format what they're playing at.
Brilliant. Thanks, Stu. Really good. Debbie, anything to add there from your perspective?
I suppose, from my point of view and how we talk about this, in the coaching environment that I'm in, we talk about mini games. So the game within the game are just broken down into those smaller numbers as Stu was describing. And it's, can have all different types of focuses. So it can have the technical focus, or if you want to try and bring different tactical concepts and bring those to life, you can break it down and make it more manageable in those bite-sized chunks for the players to practice, and then it's just about how we can relate that to the bigger 11v11 game at the weekend.
So it's almost like building blocks of player development and tactical understanding, where you can break it down into smaller units but then build it back up again. And I suppose the skill of the coach is which bits you do when for what player.
I think it's a brilliant point you make, Debbie, there, in terms of the coach noticing. Gives them an absolutely fantastic opportunity to praise, isn't it? So the positive reinforcement, because they know that the small number of practice is going to give repetition. It gives them lots of opportunities to go and notice and actually praise the player and work on what they're doing really well.
So again, just to summarise, mini tactical battles, which could be overloaded in our favour, it could be matched up, it could be underloaded, and helping players experience that and recognise moments in the game where they can exploit their strengths and opponents' weaknesses to gain a tactical advantage.
Yeah, no, I think it's a brilliant video, and the illustration really makes it really easy to understand. I think the difficulty around it, though, is because the illustration's on, you get honed into where the ball is or where the players are illustrated. Take your eyes away from the ball and actually look on, near and away from the ball, because sometimes that can tell you a story in terms of how others are creating space for the really top level play, what you're seeing in front of you.
Yeah, no, great point, Stuart. And I really like that on, around, away from the ball, because The danger is we can get caught up in the action and we just get drawn like a magnet towards the ball. And sometimes I think there's two things there. One is seeing what's going on. And also, from my point of view as a coach, often the best time to talk to a player is when they're away from the ball, because when they're on the ball, their total focus should be on what they're trying to achieve. So there's an observation piece, but then linked to that communication piece.
We love structure, don't we? And we love knowing exactly where things are supposed to go and when things are supposed to be, when they're going to happen. But in football, it's so unpredictable, and like I said, those pictures change all the time. And I think our practice design needs to be able to reflect that.
Brilliant, Debs. And I like the fact you picked up on structure, and I was smiling there because I think as a coach it's really important that you plan well and you're prepared, because that maximizes the time you have with your players and it's going to increase their enjoyment and learning potential. But I think if we look at the game, it is constantly in flux, constantly changing pitches, and it's chaotic. So a question for the coaches to consider is, do you coach from control, where you've got a set structure and an approach, and there are benefits to that? Or do you coach from chaos moments, which are more like the game, and there are benefits to that? But it's always a trade-off, and I think it's really understand your own context, understand your own players, what you're going after in the session, and then being able to justify why you've selected what you've selected. Because beyond some certain basics, there are no right or wrong ways to coach the game. There are, a million and one opinions, each of them valid. So yeah, I really like the observations and the input there, Stu and Debbie. Thank you. So we're now going to move on, and we're going to look at part 2, which is the value of small number formats to help players in training. So Debbie, I'm going to come to you first. What are the benefits of playing small number formats or small-sided games, and what are some of the considerations you think about when putting those activities on in practice with your players?
Yeah, I think there's loads of benefits to the small-sided games and smaller numbers. We think about the technical output, more touches on the ball, more moments that could be practiced in the game, like turning, like on the screen there, receiving, passing, whether you're in possession or out of possession. Those smaller sided games really allow for that. But also thinking about the tactical elements, and like I said, I touched on a little bit earlier, just if you're introducing maybe a new concept and you want to make it a little bit more manageable for the player, those smaller games can be really helpful in that sense.
We're looking maybe technical, tactical in terms of like the numbers there, but I just see it in terms of if they're getting 30 opportunities to receive the ball in 3v3, that's 30 opportunities for me as a coach to see that individual receive the ball in 3v3. So it gives me an opportunity to either observe and praise or observe and support. So sometimes the smaller numbers just allows you to see things more clearly, and then how you skillfully go and put that back into the bigger format, whatever format they're going to play at, and still notice is really key.
So things to think about for coaches is the practice spectrum. So where do you work on the spectrum? Is it unopposed, where you're working on the mechanics and the technique? Good for novices, but also good for players recovering from injury, confidence building. Unopposed with interference, that increases the range of techniques in the decision-making process, significantly there for all players, but particularly for beginners at grassroots level. Overloaded practice is good for giving realism and decision-making. So it could be a 4v2, 5v3, 6v4. But what you're saying there is we're going to give some realism because it's opposed and it's competitive, but we're also looking at repetition, and then obviously matched up replicates elements of the game. And again, what we're thinking about there is 3 R's: repetition, realism, relevance to our players. So are you going for repetition so they get lots of contacts, or are you going for more game realism so you get greater transfer of learning, greater decision making, greater position specific activities? And really the key for you, the trade-off is what's relevant to my players, and really what we're looking for is the right practice for the right players. Let's just hand over to Stu, and he's going to talk us through one of his practices. But before he does that, I think we're going to a quick video. So watch the game, it will be telestrated, and then Stu will pick up from there.
Yeah, so just really looking at the game and the game concept, illustrated obviously from the game. That's all kind of done. I've kind of lifted the visual from the game and put it into some kind of session. Now, the moment the game then was the Blues or the Whites in possession, and the Reds were blocking just by not putting pressure on the ball. So initially, the first pass in from the midfield player back to the centre half was unopposed. The idea being is I'm just taking that section of the 5v5. I've got a mini goal to the right hand side, which is replicating the number 9. But then I've also got a yellow shaded area, which is like a running zone. So not only can you play the ball into the mini goal, you can now start to try and run through the back. So when the actual illustration is doing it now, it's a 5v5 game. The idea of the game being that we just got to try and keep the ball, try and progress in a direction towards the mini goal, or we can try and get players in advance the back line to try and break past the yellow dotted line. You can only break past the yellow dotted line though and arrive in the shaded area as the ball arrives. So that the yellow dotted line is kind of an offside line. It may be the ball's on the side of the pitch. It might be coming from a throw-in. So how many times do we actually practice throw-ins within the game? And also, thirdly, you might start just by giving the ball into the red team, and we've got to try and come together, be compact, win the ball back, and then try and counter-attack towards the other direction. Obviously, if the Reds do win the ball back, I've got one goal highlighted, but you can put a second goal, you can put a running zone, you can put whatever you want, really try and finish the action. But just a bit of an illustration, really, of how observe a game, place the pitch dimensions around the group of players that you're working with, and then start to think about constructing practice. Who's the individuals within the practice? How do they score? How do the opposition score? Or what might be the rules which you might start to observe, and what's the detail you want to try and help the players understand?
So yeah, this is moving on from 5v5 to what a 3v3 might look like. So as you can see, it's actually happening in a game, and it's, as for me as a coach, how can I make this realistic and put this into a practice? How I've split this up, this can be done in a few different ways. So if you have 15 players in total that come to your session, I touched on it earlier, you can set up those parallel games, and you can have them going on side by side at the same time. Or if you're in an environment that can split the team into units, this can be quite specific, and you can work with a team maybe playing out from the back, like we saw in the clip, and then your forward unit and how they press and their structure and things, working on concepts such as that. So the practice on the left is matched up, and it's your 3v3 with the idea in mind that the team in possession are trying to break lines. And this is why I've put in those end zones, because we want to try and break the line of our opposition to get further up the pitch. The practice in the middle, again, we've seen how fluid the game of football is and how quickly things change. And depending on your terminology, what you use in club, as you can see, there's a player in yellow, so we can call them the magic player, if that's the terminology that you use. And then it's about creating those overloads and underloads, and the team in possession will have that overload, and it's about how we use that spare player again to break that line. Then it gives us a really good opportunity if we're working with the team out of possession. You've only got 2 players, you're going to have to work harder, you're going to have to work together. Your communication is going to have to be really good. The timing of our pressing is going to have to be really good, because if we don't do it in sync, they've got the spare player, we're out of the game. Thinking about step and how we adapt the practice, again, for numbers or in terms of the task. And, instead of those end zones, we've got mini goals. This could easily be, these could easily be other players. But the thinking behind this was, again, making it realistic to the clip that we saw, and making it a little bit more position specific. We've got our team in blue playing out from the back. Can we find our wide player, whether that be a right back, whether that be a wing back, and look and think about their positioning and where they would hopefully arrive. to be able to play the ball into that mini goal, the same way a number 8 or a defensive midfielder could maybe drop in to receive and play out from there, or the team, originally out of possession, so an orange in this case, when they do win the ball back, can they hit their striker, that number 9, or can they look to exploit that space?
In all good quiz shows, this is now the 1 minute round. So no pressure, fella. Over to you.
You might strip it back to the 1v1 moments of the game. Now, when I see 1v1s on the whole, it's usually me pass the ball to you, I go and close you down, you try and score in the goal behind me. But actually, when you see 1v1s all over the game, there's lots of different types of 1v1s. So how can we study the game? How can we see the game? But then how can we give players experiences which will help them ultimately find solutions to the problems which arise in the game? So you may get pressure from behind in a 1v1. Is it pressure from the front? So how do I maybe get really good so I can open the possibilities of the pitch so I can try and go both ways? It's really important when we teach young players that we try and get them to understand how to outplay in both directions. And then, pressure from the side. So how many times do we get the ball and have to figure out a way to try and, receive the ball under extreme pressure? So how do I scan? How do I move my body and position my body so I can protect the ball? And you may go overloaded in a 2v1 because, like Charlie was saying before, you might have players who might not be ready for the opposed practice yet. So how do you help them in the sight corner, gain confidence and have success? If you've got maybe a weaker player, then put him next to another weaker player. So that's they're playing like for like. So they get opportunities to go and develop and still make mistakes, but go and have success as well.
Design simple practices, small number practices, so players get lots of contacts on the ball, lots of decisions, lots of physical outcomes. Blitz them with lots of different variety and give them some technical information in bite-sized chunks. The one I'm going to share with you is, which might not have been explained, is apply the rule of 3: must get, might get, could get. So when you're thinking about technical information, it's quite useful to think about planned interventions when you know what information you're going to give, and prioritize how you structure the information in a logical sequence. So I'll start with this and I might move to this, and maybe I'll get to another point, but maybe I'll save that for another day. So in teaching, they call it all, some, few. So yeah, you don't need to give all your information in one go. So now we're going to just think about how can we support individuals recognize and exploit strengths, strengthen themselves and weaknesses in their opponent in terms of game situations. So one of the things we can do is ask the players what they think. What are you good at? What do you need to improve on? Because sometimes players are just caught up in the moment of playing and they don't really stop to think. And actually giving them that reflective time to go, what is it you're good at? And could we do more of that? Could we get yourself in that situation more often? From a motivational point of view and a tactical point of view, helping players understand their strengths and turn them into super strengths is a massive benefit.
For me, it has to be a collaboration. So get the players to kind of self-assess them, and then use the coach, have that, those different eyes to stand back and see something from a different point of view, because I think it's really important that the player feels a bit of ownership.
So I think another key consideration that we've touched upon there is, I think it's really important that you make your information interventions developmentally appropriate, or what we might call age and stage specific. So we're now going to look at what kind of information in terms of understanding 1v1 tactical battles might you give to players at different stages. So just to kick us off there, I'll start with foundation phase players. How do you gain a tactical advantage? So are they faster than me? Am I faster than them? There's some really simple ideas that you can start to just drip feed into your players just to reinforce those tactical battles, those little 1v1 games of cat and mouse.
This is a really challenging age group to coach, and I think that picture really sums it up, because the players will go away for summer and they'll come back and they're 2 feet taller, and it's really, really difficult and a really challenging time for them. As coaches, the advice I would give would be just be patient, with the players, because they're going through, this growth and maturation stage in their lives, and things can be quite confusing, and things can be quite difficult for them.
Stu, I'm now going to ask you to come in and quickly just any other detail that you would layer in with senior players.
Yeah, I just think it's so important what Derry's mentioned, that we don't miss them stages out. Really don't, because if we get it right younger down, we can save a lot of time as he starts to get older. I think sometimes it's a big race to get to the bigger formats and actually forget about individual tactics. And that's, for me, is a mistake, and it costs you time later on. So, but if they do get to a point where they're at the right age and the right stage of learning, then you're then starting to get them to think about what the tactical elements are of the game. So, what formation the opposition playing, how are they playing? How can we develop numbers to try and outplay, maybe in combination this time? What style have they got? Are they direct, or are they a team who want to try and play short? So we might be able to set potential traps to force the ball into certain areas where we can get the ball back.
So now we're just going to look at how we could personalise this for an individual player. So you might have heard of individual development plans. So what we're looking at here is how we can help maximise strengths and help players understand their roles and responsibilities.
Ultimately, the IDP could be a simple conversation, at the side of the pitch. It doesn't have to be, as detailed as this, but this is just something that I use, at my club, and it kind of just focuses around the holistic development of the player. And like I was saying earlier, it's that collaboration piece of, it's really, really important that the players have ownership over their development, and it's really important that they self-assess and start to think about them as a player and maybe as a person as well, because we know how important that is. We want great football players, but we want great people as well. We just find that this is a really good tool for the player, for the coach, to have that time to sit down and consider the strengths through observation and through that communication of what the player needs to work on and develop ultimately throughout the season.
Just to sum up, what we're looking at is holistic development, developing good people, good players, focusing on the strengths, but also, because that's really motivating, but also identifying how we can help and support players improve, their understanding of the game, their tactical battles, but also their performance as a whole, which will contribute to the team effort.